So we're going to draw a pictorial representation of the options that this economy has. We're going to use a classic example, and that example is, let's assume that using its resources and technology, this economy has the option of producing guns or producing butter. This is, of course, a very important example. It's a historical one. You can Google it. It was used, among other things, to discuss, for example, should we put our money into military production? Should we put it into food production? What are we doing? Right? So in this example, I'm going to say, let us say that in this economy, I took all my resources, all the land, all the labor, all the capital, and given the best technology I have right now, put all of those resources into gun production. And the maximum amount of guns that I can get is 100,000 guns. So right there, 100,000 guns. Of course, that means I don't have any butter, right? Because all my resources have gone into guns, I don't have butter. So no butter, but 100,000 guns. So I could produce at that point A there. Well, I say, well, maybe I don't really need or don't want to produce 100,000 guns and no butter. I would like to get butter. So let's say that I only produce 80,000 guns. And then that means that the resources that I'm not using for that 20,000 guns, I'm producing 80,000 guns, I can put that into butter production. And so what happens is I take my gun production, and it's only 80,000 guns, but then I can get, say, 350,000 pounds of butter over here. So I'm going to call that point B, right? That's an option. If I want more butter, the only way I can get it is if I have less guns, because this is the maximum I can do. So let's say that I produce 50,000 guns, and that would give me 550,000 pounds of butter. See? Or I just put all of my resources into butter production and I don't have any guns at all. And if I did that, the maximum amount of butter production I can get is 600,000, let's say here, D. Right? If I join these points, A, B, C, and D, I get a line which I am going to call the production possibility frontier. Production possibilities frontier. So a few points about the production possibilities frontier before we move ahead. The first thing I want you to realize is that already I can tell a few things out of this picture. I still don't know where this country is going to end up. I don't know whether it's going to do guns, whether it's going to do butter, how it's going to make these decisions. But I know certain things. First, if you look at this frontier, it slopes down. And we'll talk more about this downward slope later on. But the downward slope's actually meaningful. All it means is, if I want to get more butter on this axis, the only way I can do that is to get less guns. And that's because on the frontier, I'm using all my resources. Right? So the frontier is out there. This is the maximum I can do. I can produce at A, I can produce at B, I can produce at C, I can produce at D. Right? Now, it sometimes happens that in an economy, we don't end up using all our resources. There are situations, for example, which are called unemployment. You're not using all your workers, they don't get jobs, factories are lying empty, you're not using all your capital. So when that happens, what that means is instead of producing on the frontier, you're producing somewhere inside the frontier. Let's say that you're producing 50 guns and you're only producing 50,000 guns and you're only producing 300,000 pounds of butter. So you could produce somewhere at a point like U, which I'm going to call a situation of unemployed resources. So a country could produce on the frontier, that's when it's got full employment. It could produce under the frontier. That's when it's got unemployed resources. It's not using all its resources, or it's using them inefficiently. Now, countries also would like to have more of both guns and butter. So you might actually want to say that, oh, I've got 80 guns and I'm only getting 350 butter. I would like to have 80 guns and 80,000 guns and 350,000 instead of 350,000. I'd like 550,000 butter. I'd like to be somewhere over here. I'm going to call this point G for growth. This point is unattainable. I can't reach that with my current level of resources or my current technology. So the only way I can get more stuff is if, as a country, I do something. So let us say this is in 2021. The only way I can get to G is if I do something in 2021, so that maybe in the future, 2023, 2025, I get more capital, I get more land, I build more factories, I increase my resource base, or I have technology changes. I improve my skill levels, I change how much production I can get per worker, I do something to create a situation of growth. And that I would show by saying, well, in the future, my hope is that this production possibilities frontier becomes this new dashed one. So the only way I can reach this new dashed one is if I have growth, which means there has to be a change in the situation such that I have more land, labor, capital, or I have better technology so as to access higher levels of production. So the PPF is a pictorial depiction that says, these are my options, and I can look at those options and come to some conclusions about where is this country now in relation to its options. What does it have to do in order to have better options in the future? Is it making the best use of its resources right now? So that picture still doesn't tell me what I decided, but that picture is a good way for me to begin to think about what are the options a country faces and how do we think about its decision-making processes.